What's going on, y'all? This is your Don Israel. This is another episode of Lit, the premier platform for all things literary, swaggy, and everything in between. Today's guest is the super fly. I've said several times about several guests that they fly. So super fly, super duper fly. This is Mitch Jackson, writer, teacher, educator, all around swaggy guy from Portland, Oregon. Before we continue, I got to give a few shout outs for a few things. Pink Pig Productions is the one who makes the show so lit. My man Danny behind the camera, keeping the show extra lit. Surreal Jules, that music you heard in the beginning, so lit. But Mitch Jackson, the super lit guy, met him like 3 years ago.
That's right.
Tell us what you're wearing, because you always come fly. My man came through with a Cartier watch on. He a writer. Like we got these moments. You got to stand up though.
Oh yeah.
You got to get the whole. You got to get the full effect.
First of all, being fly is like faith. You know, you got to believe in it.
All right.
I believe in that.
All right. You got to stand back though. You got to
get
the
All right. So the number two is I shop to sell, so I'm not paying full price for all that shit.
Okay.
I just want that to be known.
Okay. That makes it.
Balenciaga boots. You know, Rag and Bone, Neil Barrett. That's it. All the jewelry I've been collecting. David Yerman.
Look
for
like
10 years. Yeah,
look like Yerman.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now you got to talk cause you know you're a super fly dude when you mixing flesh tones with solids.
That's right.
So tell us, how did you develop this swag, man?
All right, so I think the contrast, right? So my T-shirt is baggy. My jeans are more fitted than I normally wear.
Okay.
Plus, you need a pop color, right? So normally a pop color would be a red or a yellow, but I'm not really a red or a yellow dude. I mean, I got some red shoes.
Okay.
So I like the flesh tone because it still gives you a neutral, but it's also a pop.
Yeah. So for people, I met Mitch. Actually, I heard about Mitch before I met him. I think like most people that come into your life who end up making a big impact. This was 2015, so 2 years ago actually, heading on a plane to Minneapolis for AWP. First person I met going out to AWP was Tayimba Jess, who just won the Pulitzer. And I was telling him about literary swag, and this was back when I was just doing the interviews on camera. And he was like, you know who would really like this? He's like, I gotta introduce you to this man, Mitch Jackson. I'm like, Mitch Jackson. Fly dude, we got book glasses and stuff like that. And I don't think everybody I was talking about 2015 at AWP was like, you gotta be Mitch, you gotta be Mitch. I don't think I ended up meeting you until the Penn Awards at the New School. Probably 3-4 months later, and this is when I met you, Rob Spillman, who's the editor at Tin House, and that's when he had just won that award.
Editor for the award,
yeah. And I met you, and I was like, yeah, this dude lives up to the hype. Yeah. You had those gold and black ones on.
That's right.
With the blaze and everything. I still got the picture of that. But tell us, Mitch Jackson, how'd you grow up? Where'd you grow up? Give us the background of Mitch Jackson.
I'm glad you mentioned Portland, Oregon, because that is so much a part of me and how I view myself in the world, being from a small city who wasn't recognized when I was young, right? Our claim to fame was the Blazers.
Yeah, we also call the show Lord of the Flies because we making the moves. But keep going.
So I grew up. I was born in '75, so I am a child of the '80s. Grew up in an all-black neighborhood in Portland, Oregon.
What's the name of the neighborhood?
Northeast Portland.
Okay.
And like the '80s and into the '90s, we had our we touched with gangs and crack came around, and I was touched on all sides by that. Lots of friends who was banging. By the time I got probably 8th grade and going into high school, that's when people really started banging. I remember we used to break dance. Get a piece of cardboard out and start breakdancing. And we used to say blood. We used to call each other blood back then, like when I was probably 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And then when I got into middle school, you couldn't just call a dude blood no more. Like that shit was over.
Right.
And I remember being in middle school and somebody got shot. And we was like, girls was coming to school crying and stuff, and I was like, oh shit, this is real out here.
Yeah.
But I played basketball, so I wasn't necessarily that close to that stuff. But I remember it really shaping me. going to basketball games to watch like my older friends play or my cousin or uncle, and they, the blood just coming in 10, 12 deep and with all the rags on and shit, and they shutting down the games because they scrapping out in the middle of the floor, and then police start coming and guarding the exits and all that. It was a scary time to grow up in Portland, but it was also like, if you could come out of this, man, you could come out of anything.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I think what was, because I was born, I'm a child in the 90s, and when I was born, like crack was in full swing already.
Yeah.
Talk about, I think from a child's perspective to you, what the transition was from pre-crack, like what changed?
Yeah.
Like just.
What changed was a sense of safety.
Okay.
Like being able to go outside and play all night long. Like we tack up a basket on a street pole and play basketball. Yeah, the crate.
The crate out the bottom.
Or make a go-kart and just being out there all night long and just, you wouldn't see anything that would make you suspicious.
Right.
And then it got to like you would see somebody walking around the corner 2-3 deep and they just look crazy. Like, why y'all walking so fast and your eyes is bugged and shit? Mm-hmm. And you might come outside and your antenna gone from your car, and it's just little shit that you don't really notice as a child, but something is different. And
right.
People start telling you like, nah, I want you in. At this time, I don't want you going over there anymore.
Yeah.
And then, because my mom kind of got into it really early. I mean, had to be mid-80s, right? So it was so fresh.
So you're like 10, 11.
I'm 10 years old, 10, 11 years old. So now I'm like, mom's is gone for, a day.
Mm-hmm.
Then mom's is gone for 2 days. Then mom's is gone for 3-4 days.
Yeah.
And now you like starting to put shit together. Like these motherfuckers that is walking around here looking like this. This how mom look when she come home.
Mm-hmm.
Rustling through clothes and shit to look for money. So
mm-hmm.
You start putting it together and you start figuring out how you're gonna navigate it.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because what's ill is I think, like, not even I think, I partially, my parents went through that period where they was like using too,
Mm-hmm.
and growing up as a kid, you tell yourself, I would never be that person who created that situation that I had to go through. But then at 16, and I wrote this in an essay,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up selling.
Yeah.
Out of circumstance. It was my sister-in-law and my brother had gotten like locked up in like the same year. So my sister-in-law had gotten arrested 2006.
Mm-hmm.
When I was still a sophomore, and then my brother got, so that was April, and he told me he violated parole. They came for him after he completed his parole, saying he violated,
Mm-hmm.
and they put him in Rikers for like 8 months to let him go. But so my whole junior year, parents was gone. Me and my sister-in-law's sister had to hold the kids down because we didn't want them getting separated by the system or whatever. And so like trying to get a job, couldn't get a job. So it was like I fell into that.
Yeah.
But it was like not, like you could say it's not a choice, but it's like everything is a choice to an extent, but it's a choice based on limited option.
Right.
And so like how psychologically, I just remember that like kind of fucking me up, being
Mm-hmm.
like I made a promise not to be that person, and then you become that person.
Yeah.
How, like, what happened in your psychology of going through somebody watching people and your family doing it to becoming that? Like, how did that?
I never made a promise not to be that person.
Okay.
I think because I was coming up with it, like there were no, like, you had 10 years of people to see who were drug dealers. You had seen 10 years of like people's lives being torn apart. I was watching it happen, right? So I wasn't, and I didn't know about the world, right? Like I was still being shielded from my grandparents and my uncles. They were picking me up, and so I didn't have enough. I didn't have enough examples of what it could do because I was in the midst of watching it happen. So by the time I got to be 15, like I knew it was bad, but it wasn't like, man, you can't get into that because X, Y, and Z. It was like, this is what we're all doing, right? And it really felt like a collective because like I don't know. I mean, maybe if you counted up all of my really close friends, I would say 80% of them sold dope. at least a piece of dope at one point in their life.
Right.
So like, and not they didn't all become drug dealers, right? It might have just been one time or two times or whatever it was, but like, man, we was all doing that shit.
Yeah. Well, for me, okay, so then how, like, what is your throughway into it? Like, I remember what it was is there was a pack left in the house, and niggas needed money.
Yeah.
And it was just like, all right, like, this is what we have access to right now, and it was like, all right, as soon as we can stop, we gonna stop.
Yeah.
That was the way, and so it was like, and it wasn't even like I was on some shit where like the house had gotten raided earlier that same year because when I came and got my sister-in-law, and it was like, as I was doing it, it was a weird thing of like not really knowing how dangerous what I was doing really was. Like, you knew it was dangerous and it had like grave implications.
Yeah.
But like I would do shit like, and like a lot of my friends will know, like there was a Mike Epps stand-up called Inappropriate Behavior or something, and he had this joke about his cousin who was like, his cousin wanted to be a kingpin, but he was selling small bags. Throw the money on the floor.
Yeah, he got
so,
a nickel bag.
Yeah. So like when people would come to the door and they knock 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and I would make them throw money on them. I would be like, I had this little like fucking like ring box that I would like open the box and I was trying because the whole time what I'm trying to do is try to make it seem like something is not. Like I was trying to downplay like the danger of it.
Yeah.
Like it's so like, and I'm not like this is nothing like not proud of it, but it was like even doing that, I had to in my mind try to make it into something that like allowed me to do it.
Yeah.
Because under any other context, I was like, I can't do this. But then it was like the like, what do you do? Like what that allowed me to do was allow me to take care of my niece and nephew in a real way, let me be around them to protect them, ironically, from that. And like the whole time they had grown up and what had become over the time of my sister-in-law and my brother's incarceration, that shit had became like a full crack house. Like I knew it became a crack house when I went downstairs taking them to school one day and we saw like human shit in the hallway.
Yeah.
And I was like, we live in a trap house now. Like this is a full trap house now. It's not just one apartment. This is where like other niggas was selling in the whole. I was like, oh man. And that whole time, like my niece and nephew, like my nephew's grades was like 90s and stuff, because we had done so much to insulate, like you said.
Well, you think?
Yeah. No, I mean, in a sense, but I say that to say like the way that I guess the way you would expect someone to come out of that, they had still their childlike innocence, So yeah. But like, how did you like? What was the thing? So you had 11 witnessing, and your pops was not around.
I mean, I have men in my life who are father figures at this point, right? So I have a guy I grew up with, my brother's father, who's been there from when I was 1 to when I was 10. I had my grandfather the whole time.
You have one brother?
I got a lot of brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. There's not a child. My parents only have one child together. Me.
Okay.
So everyone is either on my mom's side or my dad's side.
Okay.
I think I've thought about this a lot, and I tell myself that I was tired of being on the wrong side of it, right? Of like watching the rent money go and wondering where you're gonna get some food from, and there's truth in that. There's also probably truth in me being a follower, right, and not making my own decisions and just being available to me. There's truth in me wanting to be fly. I feel like the first time I did it was like around prom or homecoming or something, and I wanted to get something. Nah, this we talking sophomore.
Sophomore, so 15.
Yeah, I'm
15 year olds get prom.
Everybody homecoming. It's probably homecoming.
Okay.
So. Yeah, you get prom if you fly. You get to go.
Yeah, girl invite you. Yeah.
So I feel like that was like the initial part of it. Was like, okay, this is what's been happening. You can get on the other side of this. You can get a little money to get you some shoes or some sneakers or something. But then once you get in it, and I wasn't good at it then. But by the time I got good at it, which is like when I was a senior, after I graduated. Then it became, well, now you can help somebody, right? Like now you can, if your brothers need school clothes, if your mama's rent is fucked up, or somebody needs some groceries, like you can actually do that. And then it's like, you can actually buy some shit too. Like you talk about this car. Like I went at 19 years old and was like, here goes 76. I remember that 7650. I bought a Rolex when I was 19. And I was like, fuck. And I remember the next week I went and bought some like $9,000 earrings. And I was like, shit. And I went and I remember this, man. I went and bought some Versace jeans, a Donna Karan silk shirt. I really wanted a Versace silk shirt, but I couldn't find one. I had the Rolex and the diamonds, and all my friends, we used to all meet on Saturdays and go out, and we would pick somebody's house and we'd go and we'd, pre-game. So I'm like the last dude to come in. I got my silk shirt on. It's like unbuttoned, second button or whatever it is. Got my Versace. These dudes don't even know what the Versace is. And I come in,
you can't even spell Versace.
And they like, but I also had like some Giorgio Brutini shoes on, which was, that ain't really shit. But anyway, and it was like fake crocodile too, which is even worse. But anyway, so I get in the house and everybody drinking, and somebody say something to me, and I'm feeling myself. I'm like, man, this shit. He like, how much all that shit cost me? I said, oh man, it's about $20,000. And it was like, oh, this dude got on a $20,000 outfit and a 2-cent face, and all of them dudes just busted out laughing. But I think about that now, and I'm like, I needed them, because without them, our shit would have got so inflated that I would have really been taking more risks to get to other things.
What do you mean?
So like, they kept me grounded, right? Because what's to stop a dude who can get 20,000 from getting 100 or 200? And if you go get that money, there's other risks that are involved, right? Mm-hmm. So I had a dude, I would say he's a good friend, who he was the first dude that showed me how to cook, and he was probably like 6-7 years older than me.
And so how old is this?
This is when I learned how to cook. I was probably 20.
Okay.
So I was going to get.
So for the first 5 years,
I was getting packages.
You just getting things. And the reason why I want to highlight this is because what I've realized a lot with the narrative of crack, the thing that gets underemphasized with that whole era,
mm-hmm.
and what one of the real tragedies is that it's really kids doing it.
Yeah.
And people really, and because black kids, anybody who has a black body,
right.
Everything we does get turned like they treat us like we're full blown adults. Like,
yeah.
You're a 30-year-old making these decisions as opposed to a 15-year-old who's very malleable.
Well, that's who's doing it at the street level. Right,
yeah.
There's 30-year-olds doing it. At the people that's really
when crack first started, you were saying it was already adults doing it.
I'm saying by the time that I was in my 20s, the dudes who were really making money were in their 30s or 40s.
Right.
Right. They got into it in the mid 80s.
Okay.
Right?
So they would be how old getting into it? Like.
So they would be teenagers getting into it.
But that's what I'm saying is like the entrance into it is like. That, and this is like I said, not excusing it, but putting it in full context. Like I really think about like Paid in Full is one of my favorite movies, right? But when I read like A.Z. Faison's Game Over book,
mm-hmm.
and he had talked about we gonna need that fucking tennis racket / fly swatter because they own one today, these flies. But he was talking about like being like a teenager,
mm-hmm.
and then becoming a drug dealer, and like not really explain that transition and not really putting age in a context. It's like you forget that these dudes are young.
Yeah.
So when you even hear 25 dude, Rich Porter getting killed at like 23 or whatever, it doesn't really resonate like how young that is until I'm 23.
Right.
I'm 27 now, and I'm like, damn, that's young. Because
Yeah.
I think about where I was in my mind at 23, and now I'm starting to recognize that, like the real tragedy of this is like these are kids. So like even when people say like, why they had all this money. And he wasn't buying,
right,
real estate. It's like at 2019,
yeah.
especially when you don't even have that background.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like I've started to approach what really happened with a lot more compassion,
mm-hmm.
less for like this, like just like individual people, but just like looking at like no one really knew what they were doing. They knew like you had this, you wanted that, and
mm-hmm.
it was as simple as I want a new whip, I want a chain, I want what I want, and I'm willing to get it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, it's hard to say where. I think that the guys on the front lines, you get in young. I think at somewhere there has to be a level of consciousness, though. right?
Okay.
At some point, like there's someone in that chain where there's a very explicit level of consciousness, and you don't have to go very far up to get to that level. Even if you started when you were 20, by the time you're 25, you know what it is, right? Because you also are growing up at an exponentially faster pace than everyone else, because your decisions are now life and death decisions. They're no longer like, what shoes am I wearing to school? It's like, if I do this to this person, this is gonna happen, or if I don't do this to this person, this is gonna happen. So the 25-year-old is actually 40, right? And so
in a certain way, though, right?
Like, well, he's 40 in a sense of that in that world.
Yeah.
So he also knows the consequences of that world, which means that he could impart that to a 15-year-old. Because what he's doing is he's taking a 15-year-old and saying, now you're gonna help me get to my goal, right? And the 15-year-old doesn't know, so he gets in and he buys into those paradigms. And by the time he gets to be 25, he got his own set of paradigms, and he's corrupting somebody else. So there's a level of consciousness at the 35-year-olds where I think you got to kind of accept responsibility. Like if I had a dude, and I didn't have nobody really working for me. Like the dudes who used to sell dope for me were much older than me. They were like crackheads who would like take a pack and do it. I never got like a 15-year-old and say, hey man, here go a pack and you can do this. But there are dudes who make that their business, right? To have a bunch of dudes on the street doing that. And they have to accept that responsibility because they know.
Yeah. The kids, you're saying?
The dudes who are giving it to them, they know, right?
No, and I'm saying like there are people who know, and I'm not trying to like blanket the statement and saying like there's like no one knew, but I think that a brunt of like the brutality and like the violence that was happening had a lot to do with the fact that it was kids doing it. So like the true value of life was like not really fully like not knowing what life really meant. 'Cause at 15, 16, even though I had a particular conscience about it, like I remember a pregnant woman showed up and I'm like, I'm not doing it. And the older dude was like, fuck that, I'm getting that money. And he did it, and I'm younger than him. So I think it's like it's always perspective in what you're doing, but like what I see is like the narrative of that like age is not really put in context in the driver's seat of it. So, all right, you're selling, you're moving. When does literature appear in your life for the first time?
Not for a long time.
Okay.
Well, no, I should say, when I go to my little time, probably towards the end of it. So this is, I just celebrated my 19th year out. It was July 8th, 1998. So probably early 1998 is when I say, okay, I'm gonna write down my life story. And I just start scribbling on the paper. I bring that home. But that's not really a literary life. That's just more of like some grandiose, you in the penitentiary, everybody think their life is special. You just write it down.
So now you're in jail at 98. So I know that before you went, you were already in college.
I was in college.
Studying
speech communications.
Okay. Was that like one of those basketball
It was
majors,
one of those,
like communications majors,
exactly.
Just to get you
Yeah, that's exactly
and you went on a basketball scholarship?
No. I went to 2 community colleges. The first 2 I was playing basketball, so I was on a scholarship. But when I went to a university, I was on an academic scholarship.
Okay.
So that's what they held for me when I went to prison. They, unbeknown to them that I was in prison, but they held my scholarship, and that's how I came back and got back into school. But I think there's a difference between, and I think I want to make this point too, because a lot of people, I guess because of residue, like they come up to me and they say like, I have an interesting life story and I want to write it down. Like I want to write a book, and I'm like, it's cool, but like, that's not living the literary life. Like if you came up to me and you said, I have an interesting story and I want to learn how to be a writer,
right?
That would be something else, right? Like, because people, they don't value craft. They don't value actually learning how to write. They think if you just have a story and you write it down, it's interesting enough, you can sell it, which is true. Like there's a big market for people. Like, I mean, street lit is built on that. Yeah. But I'm not doing street lit.
So let me ask you, when does the transition from just wanting to write like your own like the story, like to the literary life happen? And then how would you describe what a literary life is?
Okay. When I was I came out, I went back to school. I got a speech communications degree. I was like, what am I going to do with this thing? I was like, okay, I'm going to be a news anchor. So I started working at a news station. I was a news producer.
Wait,
yeah, exactly. Like, how I'm going to just get out the penitentiary, I'm going to be a news anchor. But this is what I was thinking, right?
Yeah. So what made you feel like you could be? And I'm not saying you didn't have the right to think that. I just want to know, like, how does that shift? Like,
well, it really was. I didn't want to be invisible.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm not going to play basketball anymore. I have this speech communications degree. How am I going to be visible in the community? And that felt like a way to do it and still have some kind of respect and still be doing something that was kind of, I knew that I liked writing at the time, so it felt like connected enough to writing for me to feel like I'm in the world. That didn't work out, obviously. And so, but while I was there, that's when I went to apply to graduate school. So I was the first.
So you didn't even have an undergrad degree yet?
No, I had an undergrad. So I got my bachelor's in speech communications. Then I worked.
So after you got out, you went back?
Yeah, after I got out, I went right back to school. I got my undergrad, my scholarship back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I finished my undergrad, and then I worked. I knew the black news anchor. Shout out to Kim Body, and he got me an internship at a news station. So I worked there for 6 months for like $6 an hour. I remember that was my pay. And then I got a job working as a news producer at the ABC affiliate in Portland, and I worked that for like a year. And while I was there, I applied to graduate school, and I still had those pages that I had came home with, but I wasn't doing anything with them. So once I got into graduate school, I started reading the submissions of my peers, and that's when I started going to readings. Like I went to my first reading when I was in grad school.
Who was the first person?
The first person I remember was C.K. Williams, is a poet.
Okay.
He passed, I think, a few years ago. And so once I started doing all that stuff, I'm like, oh, this is people who wanted to write all their life, this is what they write. And then I had my pages, and I was like, oh, I feel like this is as good as the person who wanted to write their whole life and who has read all these books. But I also knew I wasn't going to be ready at the end of 2 years, so that's when, in between the first and second year, I applied to NYU.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there, I thought, okay, you're going to need to take this serious. Like, you need to learn how to be a writer. It's not just about having a story. Like, how are you going to write this thing?
Yeah.
And that's when it really started for me.
So who was the first writer that made you feel seen? Like, you talk about visibility being, like, when you read, who was the first person you read that was like, you saw yourself in?
It's cliche, but it is James Baldwin, which is interesting because today is his birthday, right? But, so I read Baldwin, and I thought, wow, here's a story about a dude in it was Go Tell on the Mountain, right? So 1940s and 50s in New York City. But
his birthday's today, though, it was the 24th.
What's today?
His year, he's born in 1924, August 2nd. Happy birthday, Baldwin. Hey, that's lit. Okay.
Yeah, so it was Baldwin. So I thought it was interesting because I connected to him, and we had vastly different experiences, right? Like, if you look at his life coming up, well, not necessarily vastly different, because I was in the church, right? My grandma used to make me go to church and all that. But the person who made my experience available to me in a way that I didn't think on the page, in a way that I didn't see possible, was John Edgar Wideman.
Okay.
And that was the story, Wait.
Wait, okay.
It was Wait. I read Wait, and I was like, oh man.
Do you remember a particular passage?
Yeah, the story starts off, my mother's a weightlifter, you know what I mean. And when I read, you know what I mean, on the page, I was like, oh shit, like this is how the homies talk. Like, you can do this. And I finished reading the story, and then I went and what was important to me was like, how was he perceived in the world? So I went and I read his bio, and I was like, oh, he won a Penn Faulkner twice, and he was a MacArthur Fellow, and I didn't know what some of these things were, but I was like, oh, white folks respect this motherfucker.
Yeah.
And he sounds like me. He sounds like an older version of me. And so when I saw that, it was like a license.
Okay.
It was like, okay, this is how you can do it if you put the work in. And the interesting thing is, in the summer, the year that I found out about him, which was my first year of grad school, that summer he taught at NYU, and I ended up studying with him.
Damn.
So it was like all of these things coming together.
Yeah. And so the question I had asked, but I'm gonna come back on. How would you describe a literary life?
Literary life. A literary life to me is it's ceaseless, right? Like I see it in everything, in every waking moment. I'm thinking about literature or how I can translate my experience. Every time I go to a reading, I keep a pad open and I take notes, but it's not necessarily what someone said. It's a word. It's a word that triggers another word. The word that I was looking for something that I just it wasn't coming to me. So there's that. It's like I'm always thinking in narrative. I'm always thinking, how is this experience going to give me some kind of sustenance? But it's also like being a part of a community, right? Mm-hmm. It's like finding people you believe in and trying to help them get there too. So that's why, if you post something, I'm reposting it. That's why if one of my friends got something coming out, like I'm sharing it. I'm reading their work. And you can't read everything, you can't post everything, but like you got to pick some people that you really, really believe in, and you got to be advocates for them. Yeah. So that's a really big part of it. And then I think the other thing is I try to be me, and because I feel like people have this idea of what a serious literarian looks like. Right. And they don't look like us.
Nah.
And if
they look like us, then they don't look like us. Right. Like meaning like they black, but then it's like they don't have.
Exactly. Yes.
They're not, like niggas not in their colloquial phrase. Not saying it has to be, but it's like they're not coming from a particular experience, and it like so much gets done to suppress those parts of themselves. Yes. Right. And so like even like in literary language, like when those stories get talked about, if they get talked about, there was a like post like Kiese Layman wrote, and it was funny because it was like true. It was like, he wrote like, how does James Baldwin in my
those accents,
like where those accents come from, and they come from watching movies from the 40s and having that very stately like air. But then it was like you read Jessica B. Harris's book, My Soul Looks Back, and you find out like James Baldwin like Red Devil hot sauce, and he wanted like when he was in Paris, he wanted people that's the. But it's like there was no essay. There was no essay where he admitted he liked Red Devil's hot sauce, but there's essays where he talked about liking the music of Bessie Smith and fried chicken. And only in Paris did he feel like he could then partake in those pleasures, which is like anyone who doesn't know Bessie Smith's music, Bessie Smith was trap music for the 20s. Like it was the music that no respectable black person would listen to. Right. It was like the underground music. But even the way he describes listening to Bessie Smith is like he has to talk about it the way a white person would understand.
He's always translating for white people.
Yeah.
Very much aware of his audience. Mm-hmm. And not that there's anything wrong with that. But I also think like, you in order for the next person to come out of our experience, we have to give them a license, and you can't invalidate a part of themselves if they want to be true artists, right? Like you can't go to the page half of a self, and so that's why I really try as much as I can to be this person all of the time in any room that I'm in. Yeah. If I'm in a room with dudes in the penitentiary, if I'm in a room with the people who run the Booker Prize, like this is the same dude you're gonna get. I want people to, even if they don't like me, at least they know they got me.
Yeah. So speaking of like that, like person that you brought to the page, how did you? Was that a reservation that you had with Residue Years when you first started writing Residue Years? Because I know it's like an autobiographical fiction. Yeah. How was that something you was reserved about, or was that something you knew you were going to do immediately?
It was something that I had to figure out along the way. I mean, Residue was if I wrote the first words down.
About Scribner, by the way, right?
No, next one is Scribner. This one is Bloomsbury.
Okay.
If I started this in 1997, circa 1997.
Okay.
The shit didn't publish till 2013.
Damn.
Yeah. And I was working on it pretty consistently the whole time. So I was also teaching myself how to write. So this is the book that taught me how to write. Okay. So there was, I would make decisions and then I would violate those decisions. I would learn something new. I would bring it to the page. There was not a lot of, but it really, 2008 when I studied with Gordon Lish, that was when Champ's voice was born. It was like me taking these elements and going, okay, this is how I make me on the page.
Yeah. Okay, and so describe those elements, and I'm gonna ask you to read a piece so that people know what they
describe those elements. So those elements are home, right?
Okay.
Who is it? Grace Palea says you gotta have 2 ears, right? One for literature and one for home. So one is me very much trying to keep alive the language of home, but also the language of my era. Like I remember you said something to me, I think it was last week on text, and I was like, yeah, that ain't I don't know that slang, right? Or something.
Oh yeah, that's a dub.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, because I basically finished it.
Yeah.
It was a dub, yeah.
But so some people, dudes my age, some of them will like keep up with what's new, and they feel like that makes them young. But I think, I'm always trying to locate myself in time and space, and that's not my time and space. So and again, it's really about me saying, okay, well, who am I? What's authentic to me? And how am I going to project that? So part of it's home. A part of it is, I've also been in school for so damn long, right? And I've been a professor now for 15 years. So I can't ignore that language and that experience exists. So it's melding those two. And then it's listening and singing. I would say mostly what I'm trying to do on a page is sing. And then out of that singing, hopefully I say something that matters.
Okay, so like, let me, because this is page 21. Like, just give me 21 to like bottom of 22. Just give me, to give a sense of what the writing feels and sounds like.
Here comes a woman, no coat, with her wet hair matted. Closer, she looks about mom's age, and like mom, makes you wonder if she's lived a hard knock life or not. My mother will be out soon, and I can predict the promises she'll make. A script after years I can recite verbatim. Speeches she may believe, but maybe she doesn't. But that matters not. Whatever plans mom has this time, grand or small, starry-eyed or dull, my plans will be under her plans, holding them up. On everything I love, we won't lose. The woman from a few seconds ago, she's hocus pocus in my rear view. Poof. Vanishes. And when I swivel to see where to, there's an unmarked patrol car idling at the crosswalk. Your boy keeps cool at first. Clean records create reckless confidence. But when they start towards me, I push the sack in my boxer briefs, hop out my ride, and shuffle towards the nearest house, a place that favors our old house on 6, home. 2 sets of stairs to reach the front door, and I climb each one slow, as if I'm cursed with early arthritis, a janky hip, a trick knee. Truth be told, I'm giving the kind officers time to get busy with another call, to find more pressing police work elsewhere, anywhere but here. But wouldn't you know it, there must be nothing pumping in Northeast, nada. And since it ain't, I'm the object of the officers' affection, their one and only true love. And right about now, they're sending their amour through a searchlight, stabbing it all inside my ride, which I bullshit you not, bucks my eyes the size of silver dollars, and buries my breath down deep where it's hard to find. And peoples trust me. You'd be breathless too, or worse, if you knew what I knew about the Fed's famous math, 100 to 1, aka the bias effect, a la Lynn Bias, the former college star who overdosed himself into Old Glory's cocaine demigod. What I see, a porch junk with trash bags big as boulders, old bike parts, rusted tools, busted cardboard boxes, a mound of soggy clothes. What I feel, my heart stall, a vein in my neck grab. When my heart gets to pumping again, I pound at the door. No, my bad. There I go being a hype man for myself. On the for reals, it's a feathery ass knock, but I'm ready to strike a conversation with whoever answers. Hello, sir, I don't mean. Excuse me, miss, I know it's late, but hey, little man, let me holler. But see, here's the problem. Through the thin curtain covering the window, the whole house is black. Ain't enough light in there to make a shadow. In a nimbus, I harvest my sail and make a Broadway show of dialing my homeboy half-man. No lie. It sounds as if someone installed an amp in my earpiece. Wouldn't be surprised if the whole block heard it ringing over and over, heard me calling my homeboy to no avail, which shouldn't be no big old surprise since dude can make a career of being absentee. Gail Half-Man Kent, the CEO of Mr. Never There When Need Be Inc.
Hey, and what's immediately available when I read things you've written, like even if an essay you wrote about fathers for Jesmond Ward's collection, Fire This Time, is that it's a sonic quality. And I remember talking to you about this particular exercise you was given by a professor, where he had everybody read their first sentence, and it's like if you couldn't get past the first sentence, he's like, "Shut up!" Like, who was the professor?
That's Gordon Lish.
Gordon Lish.
Yeah,
and he was.
He's the sentence Nazi. He calls himself. Yeah, man. It's like I think too many of us get a pass for a story.
And all right, so unpack
I think
that.
So too many writers think the story gives them a pass to be lax at the level of the sentence making.
Okay.
So
because the story is interesting, they don't have to do the on the groundwork and making sure everything. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't believe in that.
Okay. Now, did you always not believe in that, or did it take you some time to really?
I mean, everything that I believe in now was a process of evolution, of influence of other people, of reading, of trying to develop a sense of taste. So I wasn't thinking this in 2002 when I started grad school. I didn't know anything about it. Really, I didn't have any taste because I wasn't a reader. Right. So along with me developing my style, I had to develop my taste.
Yeah.
And they kind of in unison reflected off each other.
Okay.
Yeah, man. But if it ain't singing, I don't want to read it. Really, and which is why I have such a hard time. If it ain't singing, I don't want to read it.
Okay.
Which is why I have a hard time finding a lot of prose that I'm willing to invest my time in.
Well, a lot of prose that's written is not really sonic, right?
Right.
And I think that, like, for me, my writing, the thing that's helped my sonic quality is the fact that, one, the first language I learned was hip hop. Like, my father was a musician, and he used to he taught me how to rap. So the way I learned how to speak was rapping. So he would give me little lines to recite, and I would learn.
Dope.
But when it came down, what was hard for me is translating the musicality of the way I talk or speak into a word that wasn't a rap. Yeah. And so what would happen is, what also helped the sonic quality was the fact that I would try to get a lot of people in my hood to read the stuff I would write. And a lot of them, my sister, for example, like, she has 4 kids, so she's like, I can't really be reading. I got kids, I got to do this.
Yes.
And then everybody, it was like this urgency, like, all right, read it to me, or whatever. And so I would read it, and it was funny because none of them had like an English degree, but they could just tell based off the ear. They was like, that don't sound right.
The truth is in the air.
There's too many words. That's too many letters. That sounds wrong.
That's what I tell my students.
Yeah, and so that was how I started to edit. Like, sonically, it didn't sound right.
Yeah.
And one of the things I also learned in that process, I had a dude come to me after I had read something, and he was like, "Yo, my dude, like." Because this was a dude, like, on another occasion, I had, like, tried to give him something, like, "Yo, get that shit out of my face, little nigga." And I was like, damn. He hit me, he was like, "Yo, listen, like, my bad for doing that to you. I can't read."
Wow.
And, dude was, like, in jail for a minute or whatever. He's like, "I never learned how to read, and so, like, it wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings or, like, violate them like that."
That's a solid dude for coming back and telling you that.
But it only happened when I was like, you know what? Because I feel like what I have is so important, I'm going to find a way to get it to you if you don't want to hear it. And when he saw that, he opened up. So it was me changing my approach that allowed him to change his. And when I saw that, it, like, kind of expanded my mind of, like, all right, how do I make this, how do I give this something that, like, if someone can't read it, how do I create an experience where someone will read it to somebody else and it still knocks or whatever. And so for me, I think that, like you said, like, the sonic quality, the thing I do see that a lot of prose writers don't do, they don't read their stuff out loud enough. They read it in their head. Yeah. And, like, what you sound like, but, like, what does that sound like out loud, right? Yeah. Talk to me about this new book, Survival Math. Collection of essays.
Collection of essays.
Dropping next year.
Yeah. It's more than a collection of essays to me. It's a state, a city, and a cultural history. Okay. And a family history. I mean, it's elements of memoir in there, but it's really more about, it's like, if I'm at the center of this, it's me looking out and saying, what are the spokes, right? And how did we all get, the central question is, like, how did we all get here? Yeah. Right? How did these things happen to us? And, and that, sometimes that's going back into the history of Oregon as a state and its bylaws. Sometimes that's looking at the history of crack cocaine. Sometimes that's going back to Greek mythology. So it's elements of that. I'm examining, I try to trace the history of whiteness, as ambitious as that sounds. My editor was like, you can't, why are you doing this? People have already done it. I was like, yeah, they have, but not my eyes, right? So like, even if there's the book, The Invention of Whiteness, right? But that's a white dude that wrote that. Like, I'll see it different. So it's much more ambitious than Residue, because Residue was essentially like, here we are and here's what happened. And this is it's reaching out much further to contextualize these kind of experiences. And then I did this thing where I did what's called, they're called survival files. And so I took pictures of 16 men in my family. I should back up and say, I wanted to investigate prejudice and profiling. And it was around the time that there were the high profile, like Mike Brown and those cases where they were saying, the men, how do they look? They look dangerous, or what's going on with them? So I wanted to figure out how I could speak to that. But I also, if you notice, there are some writers who, and this is not a knock, this is just a preference, who, when something happens in the community, they feel immediately responsible to speak.
Yeah,
right? So
I would definitely say for me for a while, like even as a black writer, especially in the who has social media, real estate.
Yeah.
People look to you and go,
what are you gonna say?
What are you gonna say? And then your authenticity to the movement or whatever is based on how quickly you can produce an answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that there's value in that, and I appreciate those writers, and I read that, but I have always been a person who wants to step back, and so I think sometimes I'll say something. Have you ever been somewhere and everybody be talking and then they'll be quiet and then it'll be a dude in the background going, but yeah, I had this to say. He laughed, and you're like, bro, it's over. The conversation, what you? But that's really me, because my shit is a year or two later when I'm talking about the shit. But it's I had a chance to reflect on it.
Yeah.
I had a chance to digest it, and then I don't want to be part of the other conversation. I want to have my moment.
To you, the other conversation.
So the conversation, there's the immediate response, right? There's only so much reflection that can happen in the immediate response to something.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, but that's valuable, right? Your initial response to something is very valuable.
At that, yeah.
But I want to take it and step back and say, okay, what do I think about this? I want to listen to what these people have to say, and then say, well, what do I think about what they have to say? And then I want to produce something that I don't want to be attached to the moment. I want it to be attached to something I'm concerned with.
And then to me, I think that another, to add more language to what literary is, I feel like literary is a thing that operates on its own time frame.
Yes.
Right? No matter when you
evergreen.
Read it, no matter when you read it or no matter when you write it, it's still relevant.
Yeah.
And I realized that too, because it was that sort of people don't know, I write this thing called the Fuckboy Files on my Instagram.
Yes.
And it's it is the closest thing I could get to a think piece, but without that pressure of an editor telling you, we want this by this time.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't have a response, you have to invent one.
Yeah.
And so what you do, and a lot of that writing falls on cliches and snapshots and tropes and platitudes, because it's nothing else is really there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've tried to do with the Fuckboy Files is there's been times when I've written them in the moment, but there's been times people don't know, it'll take me 5 or 6 hours to really write them, because it's I'm not just trying to write something makes me make you feel good. I'm trying to write something that's even going to challenge me to think about this.
Yeah.
And to keep this conversation alive. I remember I was speaking to my man, and we roommates in the crib, and I was talking to him about some other, another person's death. I think it was Philando Castile. Mm-hmm. And he was bro, I'm still fucked up over Trayvon. He was still back there, and it's when you kind of create that sort of sense that we have to respond to everything, it's this sense that we have to get over trauma quickly. Our trauma exists on a timeline. All right, we talked about that already. It's
right.
Like you said, it's no, your eyes decided it was over.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just starting to come to this, and you got to respect that.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the respect, all of the respect, is in the writing of it. So, like, there's an essay that I have particularly called Guilt by Association.
Mm-hmm.
That's a second person essay about my running with the police. But what the essay really explores is how my run-ins with the police have always been vicarious through people who've actually had these experiences.
Yeah.
So like, even as a dude who's so like, none of that, like, I was blessed to be in a position where I never had to have these experiences, but yet I have those sentiments that a person who has those experiences has. So what I explain is like, because I'm so afraid of not being able to identify with the bodies who become the ire of police violence, I find myself trying to identify in the first person, but I can't. So the closest experience I have to this thing that you assume I have responsibility to or access to is a second person experience.
Yeah.
And like, that was my way of resisting like the narrative of saying like, just because I'm black and I'm a kid from the hood or that doesn't mean
this happened to me.
I have it. But that's what makes it awkward, because it's like, there's a part of me that wants this to happen to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I feel authentic.
But you know though, I think I really respect your perspective on that, and your because I think that experience like this or like ours, right? Like I think white people want to hear about your suffering. It's like
it's like Vince Staples said, like, black trauma is business, big business. Yeah.
So, but they also want you to one up the other person's trauma, right?
Yeah,
so like then it becomes like, well, man, you only did a year. Well, shit, then my homeboy did 5 years. Oh, he only did 5. Oh, my homeboy did 13 years. Oh, he only got 2 brothers that was killed. So, like, you can't do that, right? The best you can do is tell your particular story. Like, so, like, you know, I was not selling kilos and kilograms of cocaine. I am not going to portray myself as a person who would go get a bag of kilos. Did I have ever sold a kilo? Yes. But, like, I don't want to be something that I'm not. I don't want to talk about, like, you know, do I have some homeboys that died? Yeah. Did all my homeboys die? No. That's, you know, so I'm not trying to. I think that there's to be authentic, right, and to not try to one up the other trauma, because every trauma is traumatic, right? And it has a resonance that needs to be explored, and you don't have to go to jail for 20 years to know that you don't like prison, and that here's the experience. So I appreciate that, and I wouldn't even ever wish for that shit. It would just be like, here's the person who has this effect on them, who hasn't gone through this, and to me, that's more important than the thousands of motherfuckers who say not more important. It is as important as the dudes who are saying I've had these particular run-ins.
And I think that, like, when you talk about the literary life, I think why my writers become literary is because I had to actually think about my proximity to something.
Yeah.
Whereas just assuming it, I had to really question it in the writing of it.
Yeah.
Do you have something from Survival Map that you could share? Like a little niblet, little opening paragraph.
Yeah.
While you do that, put you on to this little drink. You gotta answer the.
I'm gonna send him to message.
All right, cool. So we gotta pop this open real quick.
Let me see.
Gotcha. Let's get.
I'm gonna find this joint because it's Shout out to Tin House. They about to publish some survival files.
Okay.
Where's Tin House? Let me see. I know I got that shit in my email. Tin House. There it is. My page. Yeah.
Okay, boom. So wait, before you get to that, we're gonna do this little Marduce mix.
All right.
We always gonna cue you up.
So
you got to drink.
Before we say this,
let's
just say that I've had some bad experiences with dark alcohol, but this is a special moment here.
Okay.
For this Duce mix.
I appreciate you.
All right.
So you're just gonna drink past the leaves or the Martinelli.
Oh, you gotta drink.
You gotta drink past the leaves.
It's okay. Juice. Now, the apple juice. Okay, yeah. All right.
It's not a drinking game. I wasn't trying to.
All right, that's cool. Yeah,
we're gonna pour you up. Boom.
All right. Yeah. Cool. That's no problem. I got that. That's all day.
Hold on, and then you gotta cut the top on.
Oh, okay. All right, little mix. All right.
Swirls around. And cheers, brother. Thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate that, my
Boom.
brother.
All right.
Boom. Let's see. and I taste that shit in there too. Like,
Yeah.
it's in there.
Yeah.
For real. Wow.
Yeah. So, give us that paragraph. Give
This
us,
paragraph.
Give us, yeah.
All right, so the
Context,
premise is that I
yeah.
I interview my family members. I ask them one question: what is the toughest thing that you survived? I translate their survival experiences into second-person narratives.
Okay.
This was the hip, slick, cool years. You sold the cocaine and your older brother the heroin, and both of you lived in his curious colored house out in the suburbs. You could claim this was the consequence of somebody burgling TVs and guns out of that house. Might contend it began days after the heist, when you drop by the pad of a dude who buys your coke and see a Triniton TV in it. You ask him where he copped the TV, and he reveals he bought it from a white boy who you also sell dope. Your friend admits that the white boy furthermore sold him a gun, which, as it turns out, was also stolen from your house. Well, ain't this a bitch, you say. You put out an APB for the white boy and obtain an address out in Southeast. You recruit your ace boon coon and a younger brother and hop in your ride armed with pistols and a shotgun and wheel out to Southeast with half your hardening heart set on killing him. Soon, your hodgepodge crew of hitmen reach the address and, strapped, march onto the front porch. The house is lit and you can see people loafing inside it, see what looks like a family, not one of whom resembles the white boy. It don't take long to glean you've been fed a bunk address for your slapdash crew to scramble stealth off the porch and into your ride, for you to wheel back to the Northeast, woofing the whole way about what you'll do if when you find this thieving ass Peckerwood.
Okay, this is gonna be the move when it drops. So tell people where they can follow you on the gram.
Follow me on the gram at Mitch S. Jackson. I think that's my Twitter and my Instagram.
Okay, cool. Website?
MitchellSJackson.com.
All right. Any events coming up? Any notable things?
I'm reading. My program. I think when is my next reading? Yeah, I feel like the first time I'm going to read is I'm reading at NYU for my program, and then I'm reading at University of Kentucky in late September.
Late September.
Yeah.
So follow Mitch on all the things. Yo, Danny, can we grab my bags? We got a gift for Mitch. We always playing with the format of the show, and I'm always forgetting one thing or the other. But my man Danny on the post-production, on the behind the scenes keeps me.
Sure.
Yeah. Just throw the bag. So always for being lit coming through. Gotta bless my man Mitch. This is for you, brother.
Boom! I heard these are selling like hotcakes online too.
Yeah. That's a $100 pin.
Yeah.
But you get it free for being lit.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
The real deal.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, your literary swag. The first time I asked you, it was one thing. Has it changed?
I can't remember what I said, but I'll give you my current.
Okay.
All right. Acme Studios, that's my go-to brand.
Okay, that's the swag we're starting with.
David Yerman, it's my
Okay.
go-to brand for jewelry. And let me see. I'm gonna go with Dita for the specs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now what we got for the literary?
For literary, I'm still going with Baldwin.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Jimmy. John Edgar Wideman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go with Tony K. Bombard.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a good look.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is another episode of Lit you've been listening to / watching if you're on the podcast. Follow us at Lit Platform on all the platforms. Follow me at Yadon, YAHDON. We're going to have a post-production thing slide in right there. This is Yadon Israel with my man Mitch Jackson. We out. It's lit.